Is Filip Chytil nearing a miraculous return to the New York Ranger lineup just in time for the postseason? And if he does come back, how should and how will the Rangers use him?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1047 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So obviously, within the last couple of days here, we've been presented with the news, the awesome news that it is at least possible that we see Filip Chytil dressing for Ranger postseason hockey. And I mean, right off the bat, I think we just needed to take a second to really let that sink in. Obviously, Filip Chytil was in a bad way. He had the concussion earlier this season. He had the spill during practice, had to be helped off by a couple of his teammates when he was trying to come back the first time. And we'll talk about that, the dangers, potential dangers of him playing. And, is this going to happen? Should this happen? We'll get into that in just a little bit. But the very simple fact that this is even being talked about, even being discussed, is pretty wild to think about. And, one thing that kind of comes to mind, we'll get to the hockey perspective in just a minute here, and we'll try to figure out how he fits into this lineup and who he should play with and how many minutes a night you should get and all that fun stuff. But just the boost from a morale perspective, Filip Chytil is one of those guys that always seems like he's very popular amongst his teammates. We saw a few years ago, was it last year? He won the Good Guy Award from the media members, which basically goes to the player that cooperates the best with media members, and he won that not long ago. It was either last year or the year before. But somebody who, again, very popular and a very useful player for the Rangers to have going into the playoffs if he indeed is able to return. And, speaking of the morale boost, I mean, don't take my word for it. Look at the video that the Rangers posted on their social media channels. They pretty often, I think pretty much after every single game, they'll have cameras in the locker room. And the one thing they always get, and I think pretty much always post, is when the Broadway hat gets passed along to somebody else. And the video that they posted most recently, obviously the Rangers beat the Islanders, and Mika had the Broadway hat, and he shouted out a couple guys. He shouted out Panarin, he shouted out Igor Shesterkin, but then he decided that he wanted to give the Broadway hat to Braden Schneider. Schneider does the quick speech, and away we go on to the next game, right? But you could see in this video, kind of in the doorway of the locker room, Peter Laviolette is there. Looked like Dan Muse was right behind him. But you also had, standing right next to Peter Laviolette, none other than Filip Chytil. He was wearing the suit and tie, and actually Blake Wheeler was there too. He was standing kind of behind Chytil and behind Laviolette, and so it's just cool that those guys are around the team right now. I do think it can be a morale boost, and just wild that we're even talking about this, the possibility of Filip Chytil playing hockey again this season. And while we're kind of on the subject of Wheeler, we'll take a quick detour here, and then we'll get the attention back on Filip Chytil and what he can bring to the table, and obviously how much he can help this team going forward. But my understanding is that Wheeler only gets back if the Rangers are able to make a deep run, and that's really a best-case scenario. And, I do have to wonder at this point, would Wheeler even work back into the lineup? Because obviously they brought over a couple of forwards, Rosovic and Wenberg at the trade deadline. Would he even get his spot back? It's hard to say for sure, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But with Filip Chytil, I mean, he's 100% going back into the lineup if he's able and ready to do so. I would love it from the hockey perspective. I would love it even more from the human perspective, though. From the hockey side, I mean, if you get Filip Chytil back for the playoffs, you might get Playoff Fil. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago to be exact, he had that really fun run with the kid line in the playoffs that year. There were nights where that line, of course, Chytil, Lafreniere, Kakko, they were the best line on the ice. There were other nights where maybe they were a little bit quiet. And of course, the series against Tampa, the well just kind of dried up in terms of offense in general for the Rangers. But for the most part, you have to be happy with the postseason that Filip Chytil had that year. He ended up with 7 goals and I believe 2 assists in those 20 games that the Rangers had there, and some important goals scored along the way as well. He got to basically shatter the hopes and dreams of Ray Ferraro. If you guys remember, Rangers were in round 2 of the playoffs, Game 7 on the road against the Carolina Hurricanes, and the Rangers build that 4-0 lead. The Canes get one back in the third period, and Ray Ferraro starts to explain how, well, you know, if you're the Canes, you're thinking, if I can just get one in the next 5 minutes, and as soon as he starts saying that, Filip Chytil, or it might have been either Kakko or Lafreniere stole the puck. It might have actually been Kakko, but they got the puck to Filip Chytil, and the play-by-play guy says over Ferraro, as Ferraro is trying to explain this, Chytil scores. And so that put the Rangers back up by 4 goals, and they were well on their way. And a completely demoralized and defeated Ray Ferraro then says, never mind, because he knew, just as we did, that was pretty much the dagger, and the Rangers were going to be moving on. But and then last year, you get what we could call, I'd say, a mini breakout season. I mean, a true breakout is like, I guess, point per game status, and certainly Chytil did not do that. But career high 22 goals last year for Chytil, career high 23 assists. Obviously, that's a career high 45 points. And somebody that just gives you a little bit more scoring depth, certainly adds a speed dynamic to this team. Chytil's got a nasty shot as well. And I think these are all positive things. And again, if he's available and he is 100% cleared and he's given the green light from doctors, not from me, not from you, not from, anybody just kind of watching this game, watching this team, covering this team, whatever it might be, it's got to be the doctors that are stepping in there and giving him the thumbs up and the green light. But obviously, if that happens, he certainly becomes an option. And I do think he would be in the lineup for game 1 if that is the case. From the human side, though, this is even better because, Filip Chytil's been through a lot. He's still very young. What is he, like 23 at this point, 24 at the oldest? He's had more than his fair share of concussions. Concussions are always very, very serious. And, it's just more than his fair share of adversity thus far in his career. He's had more than any player should probably have to go through in terms of injuries and concussions for their entire career. And like I said, he's just now approaching or getting into his mid-20s. So obviously, you keep your fingers crossed that he is able to come back and he's cleared to do so and is healthy enough to make it happen. And like I said, we'll talk about it from that perspective in just a little bit here. But this is something I tweeted out the other day. If the Rangers win the Stanley Cup, and I know we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. The playoffs haven't even started yet, but they are in the running to have the best record in the NHL. They look like a team that's primed to go on a deep run, and obviously we hope that that's the case. If they do win the Stanley Cup, big if, again, but if it happens, what needs to happen? Obviously, it's tradition for the captain to get the Stanley Cup trophy first. Jacob Trouba takes the trophy, bam, he hands it right to Filip Chytil, like instantaneous. Think back to some of you might not have been watching hockey this long, but Joe Sakic, Avalanche win the Stanley Cup. It was Ray Bourque's final season of his career. He had never won the Stanley Cup. I think that was like his 22nd year in the league or something like that. Was very much a role player at that point. But Sakic takes the Stanley Cup, hands it right off to Bourque. Bourque, obviously at long last gets to lift the Stanley Cup. Now, it's not quite on that level in terms of, Filip Chytil. I mean, he's not like 40 years old and at the very end of his career here, but the adversity he's gone through, I think that would be a really cool sight. And picture that happening at Madison Square Garden, right? The roof would come off that place. The roof is going to come off that place in game 1 if Filip Chytil is even in the lineup. I mean, they're going to cheer the first time he's on the ice. They're going to be probably chanting his name and everything. And if he scores a goal, in game 1, again, hang onto the roof of Madison Square Garden if and when that happens. But we're going to keep talking about Filip Chytil. Want to cover this from every angle. It's obviously a really cool story that this is even being considered. In just a second, we're going to talk about his role in the lineup and who might be the odd man out or odd men out, I guess, because you would now have 14 forwards going for 12 spots, basically. So we'll get to that in just a second and some other things as well. First, though, we definitely would like to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. It is playoff time in the NHL and the NBA. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. It's Locked On NFL's Mock Draft Live on April 17th at 7 Eastern Time, streaming on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on April 17th at 7 Eastern Time to hear who the local experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL mock draft on April 17th at 7 Eastern Time, streaming live on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right. Let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. I want to talk about, kind of the ramifications, the ripple effect that Filip Chytil's return might have on the lineup. And specifically, the first thing we got to do is figure out who's in and who's out of the lineup when it comes to the 12 forwards that will dress for game one. And again, this is if Filip Chytil's back. We don't know for sure that that's going to happen. We'll wait and see. But if that does happen, you will now have 14 forwards going for 12 spots. And as a quick addition here, I should also mention we've basically got 7 defensemen going for 6 spots. It's looking like it's probably going to be Erik Gustafsson nailing down that 16-man spot. But the forwards, a little bit less certain. I did see a tweet where, from the Ranger beat writers that it sounds like Matt Rempe is going to be in the lineup against the Ottawa Senators tonight for the regular season finale, and Johnny Brodzinski will be the odd man out. So the fact that this is happening 2 games in a row, it seems somewhat likely that we're going to get Rempe in game one. And Peter Laviolette, during his presser today, said that he does feel like Matt Rempe is ready for NHL postseason hockey. And that could be touch and go. We might see different lineups in different games. But this seems to be at least a little bit of a hint that we might be getting Matt Rempe over Brodzinski in game one of the playoffs. Obviously, we'll see what happens there. But as for Filip Chytil, if we add him to the equation of this whole thing, then you've got to take 2 forwards out of the 14 and make them healthy scratches. And the thing is, I don't think any of them really deserves to be a healthy scratch. I don't think any of them have played poorly. But if 2 of the 14 have to sit, I think you're probably looking at a situation where it's Brodzinski and Rempe. They've been the odd men out of the lineup, I should say, more often than any other Ranger forward, at least down the stretch here. We saw Roslovic as a healthy scratch not that long ago. It was only 1 game, though. I guess it's something that can't be completely ruled out. He could be a candidate. But, then there's going to be some people saying that Goodrow should be the odd man out. Goodrow has played some of his best hockey recently for the Rangers. That fourth line has really played well, just some blue-collar, grinding kind of shifts where it feels like the puck is at least in the offensive zone for the entirety of the shift. They're hitting, they're playing physical, they're fighting for loose pucks. There's a lot to like from that Ranger fourth line recently. And if they haven't scratched Goodrow all season, they're not going to do it now. They're not going to do it for game one of the playoffs. I mean, there's other guys you could throw out there as total dark horse kind of long shots. I mean, I guess VZ, you could maybe throw Wenberg or Cooley in there too, but I think all those guys I just mentioned are going to play. And like I said, if Filip Chytil does play, I think you're looking at a situation where the 2 odd men out, and again, it could depend on opponent because there's basically 6 different teams the Rangers could end up playing in theory in the first round, even this late in the regular season, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, I think the 2 odd men out probably will be and probably should be Brodzinski and Rempe. But again, that's not my decision to make, and we'll see how the Rangers look to play it if Filip Chytil comes back. The other question that kind of springs to mind, throughout this entire excitement, the idea of getting Filip Chytil back in the lineup is this safe? Is this wise for Filip Chytil to do this? Is it wise for the doctors to clear him? Look, a lot of people, myself included, I'm sure a lot of you as well, were worried about Filip Chytil. I mean, the concussions were piling up even before this season started. And so once he got a concussion early in the year, it's certainly a red flag. And obviously, you've got to be sure that Filip Chytil can do this and that he's ready to go before you clear him. And like I said, he was starting to build up, nearing a return, getting back at practice at least. He was participating in non-contact drills. He wasn't cleared for contact. That's my understanding. But then out of nowhere, we're all getting excited about the possible return of Filip Chytil. He's out there on a mostly empty rink. It was just Chytil, Zach Jones, and Jake Leschyshyn that were on the ice. Those were the 3 players that were going to be scratched against, whichever team the Rangers were playing that night. And next thing you know, you get a bunch of beat writers from the Rangers tweeting out that Filip Chytil is down on the ice. And nobody knows. Nobody seemed to really see what happened. But it does sound like it was kind of traced back to the concussion symptoms. And obviously, that's not good, and that's scary. I mean, forget about hockey. That's scary as it pertains to life in general. So that happened, and that happened during, again, a practice where he was one of only 3 skaters on the ice. He's not out there playing in an actual game, playing against opponents who are going to look to hit him. I'm not saying that, like, Chytil's opponents are going to specifically target his head and try to use the fact that he's had concussion history to their advantage. I hope they're not doing that. I mean, that's just on a whole nother level of disgusting if they are. But it's a physical game. We know that. And you're going to get knocked around a little bit. I mean, sooner or later, you play enough games in this league, you're going to take a hit. I mean, can Filip Chytil, can he withstand that? Is he at a place right now where the concussions are sort of behind him or all the way behind him? Again, I'm not a doctor with this stuff, so I'm not going to try to act like I am. I'm not going to try to add, my medical diagnosis here because I don't have one. I'm not qualified to give one. So my whole thing here is this has to be something that team doctors in general, clear him to do. I think that our trust has to lie in the hands of those doctors. And if they say he can do it, then okay. If they say he can't do it, then I think you have to adhere to the doctor's advice if you're Filip Chytil and just the Ranger franchise in general here. But we'll see what happens. I mean, again, it sounds like at practice, he's all good to participate in all these drills. And obviously, we're a little bit less than a week away from game 1 for the Rangers, and we'll see how everything kind of shakes out. But it's just a crazy story. And it's just such a feel-good story that, again, this is even being talked about. But like I said, it's one of those things that has to be cleared, obviously, by doctors. And one other thing that I'd like to throw out here, as far as the Rangers like potentially going over the salary cap, we don't have anything to worry about there because once the playoffs begin, the salary cap essentially does not exist. And you can go ahead and ask Tampa Bay and Vegas about that. They've been using these tricks to dance around the salary cap in recent seasons. Everybody gets put on LTIR. And then miraculously, somehow, all these players on LTIR, they're suddenly feeling better by game 1 of that team's playoff series. I saw something where the Knights specifically have done this with Mark Stone for 3 years in a row. Mark Stone has gone on LTIR right before the trade deadline. Obviously, you put him on LTIR, his cap essentially no longer counts, and you can bring in more players via trade without going over the salary cap. And then some way, Mark Stone is always ready to go for game 1 of a postseason series. Look, they're taking advantage of a loophole that the NHL, for one reason or another, refuses to close. It is what it is. They're playing by the rules. I think it's a ridiculous rule, but that is the rule. And if the other teams can exploit that loophole, teams like Tampa, teams like Vegas, then certainly the Rangers can do the same thing. And hey, it is what it is. If the NHL wants to actually smarten up and take a look at this rule and at least look at some different options here so teams can't do this, put players that are healthy or at the very least get healthy down the stretch, that they can't put them on LTIR anymore and, save salary cap space in that way. I think the NHL certainly should look at that. But the bottom line is they haven't really done so, or at least not in a way that has resulted in a change. So if other teams can take advantage of this loophole, Rangers might as well go ahead and do it too. Going to keep everything rolling in just a second. Want to talk about Filip Chytil's ideal fit in the lineup, where I think he should be, where I think the Rangers will put him. Those two things are not one and the same, but they may surprise us. You never know. I'll get to that in just a second. But first, definitely want to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Sleeper. We are at the end of the regular season, Ranger fans, and the Rangers are one win away from getting first place in the NHL for the entire regular season and the President's Trophy. But regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Panarin or Kreider or Zibanejad or Igor will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8-player stats. You heard me, Ranger fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention, nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you will get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right. Best use of Filip Chytil if he gets back into the lineup. And again, we don't have confirmation that that's going to happen, but clearly it is something that is now at least on the table. If he gets back in the lineup, where do we put him? My personal choice, top line, right wing with Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider. This is the spot in the lineup this year that has had the most overturn. It's basically been a revolving door, one player after the next. Certain players have gotten multiple opportunities to play in that spot in the lineup. And when you look at the Ranger lineup right now, everything else seems, kind of firm. You could always try to, I don't think the Rangers will do this, and I don't want them to do this, but I guess something we could at least put on the table as an option. Easy to forget this. Filip Chytil actually started this season as the second line center, centering Panarin and Lafreniere, and they didn't really get a chance. Chytil played a handful of games, but obviously his injury happened very early in the season, early November to be exact. And once he got injured, Vincent Trocheck took over, and that line has not looked back. They have not broken up that line a single time this season. There have been a couple in-game lineup adjustments where, the Rangers maybe aren't playing great, and so they shuffle the deck. But by the time the next game rolls around, those three are always right back together, and for good reason. They've obviously played very well. One of the best lines in the NHL this season. That's not hyperbole to say that. So are they going to put Filip Chytil back in there on the second line and move Trocheck down? No, I can't see any way possible that happens. Trocheck, he's just too good to be in the bottom six right now. He's had a phenomenal season for the Rangers. And like I said, there's awesome chemistry from that line of Trocheck, Panarin, and Lafreniere. They bring it every night. They've been awesome. If they haven't broken that line up since November, again, they're not going to do it now as we gear up for the playoffs. So I think we can rule out that option. How about the third line? That's at least possible. You could have a situation where they put Chytil back at center on the third line. And if that was the case, he'd be centering Will Cooley and Capo Caco. It's something they could do. With Filip Chytil, I don't think you're going to put him on the fourth line because he just doesn't have that kind of a profile, and you want to get some offense out of Filip Chytil, and you got to figure he'd be in the top 9 somewhere. Doing it the way I just mentioned, though, that would probably, not even probably, it would relegate Alex Wennberg to a fourth line role, which he could play. He's a defense first forward and somebody that, could play that style, I think. We haven't seen Wennberg on the fourth line for the Rangers. He's basically been locked into the third line ever since he got here. So that's an option. The other thing you could do, another way to get Filip Chytil back on the third line, and this is what I think the Rangers are probably going to end up doing. I think they're probably going to leave Wennberg at center on third line if Chytil gets back into the lineup. You leave Capo Caco at right wing, and you put Filip Chytil at third line left wing, and then you bump Will Cooley down to the fourth line. That fourth line has played very well recently. They play a hard-hitting, grinding style. Will Cooley can do that for you for sure. And I think that they could see that as an option. Of course, it's also the playoffs, and I think Will Cooley has built up a certain amount of trust with the coaching staff, but he is inexperienced. He's a rookie. What is he, like 21 years old? So them lightening his load a little bit for the playoffs, bumping him down and cutting back on his minutes on the ice, that's something that I could see the Rangers doing. That's honestly what I think they will do. I think you'll see, if Chytil returns, a third line left to right of Chytil, Wennberg, and Caco, and then you'll see Will Cooley on the fourth line. But that's not what I would do. As I mentioned just a second ago, my personal preference is you put Filip Chytil at top line right wing. It's been a really long time, at least a few hundred episodes here, where I've seriously brought up the idea of Filip Chytil switching from center back to wing. The early days of this podcast, when we were in like single-digit numbers and like double-digit numbers, I kept throwing out the idea. It was an idea that I liked quite a bit, of Filip Chytil playing wing instead of center. I just think he can better take advantage of his shooting, better take advantage of his speed, better, or I guess not have it to the detriment of the team, what he does on the faceoff circle. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think Chytil was doing a little bit better on the faceoff circle this season than in previous seasons. He's gotten a little better in that area over the years, but certainly it's not, his chief asset or anything along those lines. So for all those reasons, and again, the fact that there's been a revolving door at top line right wing, I'd like to see Filip Chytil get the next crack at it. I know that's a lot. You're putting a lot on his plate. Filip Chytil, I know you haven't played since the beginning of November, but we're going to have you out there at right wing, which is a position that you haven't played in a little while, and you're going to be on the top line, and no pressure or anything like that. But I think Filip Chytil can handle it. A player that over the years that he's been a Ranger, we've seen his confidence grow and grow. I certainly don't think he would say no to such an assignment, getting to go out there, play with Mika Zibanejad, and play with Chris Kreider, even if it is at wing as opposed to center. But, we've seen everybody. We've seen the Rangers try everybody at that top line right wing spot this season. It went from Caco to Wheeler to Caco, I think back to Wheeler and then Brodzinski. And then I think Caco got his third opportunity there. And then we've seen Roslovic ever since they traded for him. We saw Jimmy Vesey there for a game, back to Roslovic. Roslovic was a healthy scratch. So at this point, yeah, that's as good a reason as any. They've tried almost everybody else that's really even a possibility. I really don't like Kakko there. It just feels like he fades into the background, whereas when he's on the third line, it's just a little bit more noticeable, a little bit more assertive. Blake Wheeler obviously is not an option because he's injured. Brodzinski, I mean, him and Vesey, I kind of lumped together. You could put either one of them there. That is at least an option. It's something on the table, but I do think that both of them are better suited for depth roles, for fourth line roles. I guess never say never as far as them moving back up the lineup at one time or another in this playoff run here. But for me, Filip Chytil is your guy. And I don't know where that would leave Jack Roslovic, because if you take him off of that top line right wing, I mean, you're not going to put him on the fourth line, right? So you could be looking at a spot where if the Rangers did that, Roslovic could be a healthy scratch, which, you wouldn't really expect that to happen when the Rangers trade for him and you go from the top line to not in the lineup at all. I mean, that's quite the jump, but I don't know. Roslovic, he's just not a very noticeable player on a lot of nights. I mean, I guess you could put him on the fourth line. There's no rule that says you can't, but I don't look at Jack Roslovic and see him as like a fourth line player kind of a game. He just doesn't have that. So I don't know, but I think you move Filip Chytil to top line right wing and you let the other dominoes fall as they may. You figure it out from there, because I just feel like, Filip Chytil, you give, a real big time speed aspect to that line with Mika Zibanejad and with Chris Kreider. Obviously, Filip Chytil has played in the top six before. It's not like this is foreign territory for him. And of course, Filip Chytil, before he got injured this season, the concussion and everything, he was ticketed for a pretty big role. They had him out there. They trusted him enough to center the Panarin line. And again, I don't think they're going to go back to that, but clearly they are confident in Chytil. Clearly, Laviolette liked what they were seeing from him in the training camp, in the preseason, and they were, confident enough in him to give him, once again, that top six role and that role centering the Panarin line. So we'll give Chytil the top line right wing spot. In my perfect world, I don't know if you guys would do this. I don't think the Rangers are going to do this. This is just what I would roll with. So you do that. And I think you also give Chytil a spot on the second power play unit. And he would most likely take the spot of either Wenberg or Roslovic there. I don't think you're going to touch Lafreniere or Kakko, whichever defenseman is out there. They've mixed and matched things on the second power play unit. A lot of guys have kind of come and gone throughout the entire season here. But I do think Filip Chytil deserves to be back out there on that second power play unit. And hey, that's kind of a mini reunion of the kid line, because they're not going to play together at even strength. I mean, you could end up with Chytil on the same line as Kakko. That's at least possible. You're not going to see all three of them, though, at even strength, barring something unforeseen. But you can at least have them out there, for the 12 seconds that the second power play unit gets per night. I mean, they could at least be out there for that. So that could be fun. And who knows, maybe they make some magic. They score a power play goal or two in this playoff run, the reunion of the kid line there. But to kind of wrap up today's episode, I thought we could go ahead and just kind of take a look at the standings right now. Now, there are a lot of clinching scenarios with the Rangers if they don't win this game against the Senators tonight. There's different things if they lose in overtime and get a point. There's different things if they just lose outright in regulation and get 0 points. But the bottom line is, if the Rangers win this game, and I think most of you are aware of this, but if they win this game tonight, they don't have to worry about anything else. They finish with the best record in the Metro, the best record in the Eastern Conference, the best record in the NHL. And there are games, for the rest of this week, all the way through Thursday, I want to say, regular season games remaining, but none of that will matter to the Rangers, because the Rangers, at that point, like I said, with a win tonight, they will clinch everything that there is to clinch in the regular season. And that would obviously be a good thing. I mean, it'd just be good to get into the playoffs with 2 straight wins here. Rangers are at home against the Senators tonight. No disrespect, but you know what? Beat a team that you should beat. Go into the playoffs feeling good and claim everything that there is to claim as far as the regular season standings are concerned. Now, as far as where things stand among the playoff hopefuls in the Eastern Conference and just what a jumbled mess that is and who the Ranger first-round opponent could be, this is where things are. So the Islanders, they are in third place in the Metro Division. They have not clinched yet, but they're close. They have 2 games left. They have 90 points, so they're in the driver's seat. Then you've got, as far as the wild cards are concerned, Tampa Bay is going to be the top wild card. They can't go up or down. So that's where they are. And then this is when it really gets crazy. The second wild card, the final playoff spot. You've got the Capitals, the Red Wings, and the Flyers in a 3-way tie with 87 points apiece for that final playoff spot. And the order that I said those teams, that's the order of the tiebreaker as well. If things ended right now, the Capitals would be the last team into the playoffs. They would have the tiebreaker against Detroit. Then you've got Detroit after that, and then you've got Philly after that. So again, 3-way tie, but that is the order of those teams right now per the tiebreaker. And that also means that round one right now, and this could change, this could definitely change, but round one right now, as far as the Ranger opponent, is the Washington Capitals. That's where things stand currently. You've then also got the Pittsburgh Penguins that are 1 point behind the Caps, the Red Wings, and the Flyers, so they need help to get in. Honestly, looking at the schedule of all these teams, I feel like Detroit, it's basically theirs for the taking because they play the Canadiens twice. And the Canadiens are not a good team at all, second to last place in the Eastern Conference. So it's right there in their hands. We'll see as far as like the toughest matchup for the Rangers or the team you want to avoid. I mean, I don't know. To me, at some point, we got to start talking about the Rangers being a team that teams don't want to play. The Rangers have the best record in the NHL. They've got a world-class goalie. They've got superstar players. They've got a good amount of depth. They've got two lethal special teams units. The last I checked, they were third in power play, second in penalty kill. I mean, do you want to play a team that fits that description? I certainly wouldn't, and that's the Rangers. And, whoever the Rangers play, they end up playing. As far as, where things stand and how I think it's going to shake out. I mean, just looking at the teams that are remaining and are on the bubble and the remaining schedule, to me, Detroit, more so than anybody, looks like they're kind of in the driver's seat as far as getting in. And obviously, the Islanders are in the driver's seat. They haven't officially clinched yet, but it's right there for them. But yeah, the Rangers could play any number of in the first round. The Islanders, they could actually play the Lightning if the Bruins pass the Rangers in the Eastern Conference, but the Canes don't. That would make the Rangers the second division winner. They would play the top wildcard team, and that would be Tampa. That doesn't seem likely, but you know what? Never say never. They could end up playing the Capitals. That's who they're lined up to play right now. They could play Detroit. They could play Philly. They could play Pittsburgh. So again, you've got 6 potential postseason first-round opponents for the New York Rangers, which is crazy. I feel like in recent years, they were kind of locked in to play the Devils last year, and 2 years ago they were locked in to play the Penguins, but things are obviously different this year, and we'll just see how everything shakes out. It'll be fun to sit back and watch the chaos, but let's see the Rangers win this game against the Senators tonight, get those 2 points, clinch everything there is to clinch in the regular season, and then we'll just take it from there. Pretty crazy, though, to think that in the next episode of Locked On New York Rangers, the Ranger regular season will have concluded, and we'll be talking about the playoffs, and that's obviously going to be a ton of fun. Definitely looking forward to that. But we can call it there for today. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.